So I want to welcome everybody to our third and final webinar for our Equine Welfare Data Collective Animal Shelter Software Education Week. And this webinar is the third of three. Our first one was for custodial record keeping, so organizations that take custody of equines. Our second one was non-custodial record keeping, and that is organizations that are working with safety net programs, direct placement programs, taking owner requests. And then this webinar is going to focus on fundraising and volunteer management. And just as a refresher, if you didn't attend our first two webinars, this whole series came out of the data we had analyzed for the Equine Welfare Data Collective. And we had realized that anywhere from 40% of organizations are relying solely on paper record keeping systems, and upwards of 70% are focusing on only paper record keeping and a combination of spreadsheet software. So we really want to help organizations keep better records, because we feel that not only is that going to make it easier for them to submit data to us, but more importantly, it's going to help them keep better track of their own organization programs, help them better connect with their community, identify programs that are successful within their own organization, and just communicate about that success either with donors or local law enforcement or their own community in general. We began to work with a group called W4Site, who's here with us today, and I'm going to turn it over to them in a second. But just to remind you, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box, and we'll answer them live as Karen and Debbie present today. And then we'll also do kind of an open Q&A at the end. The chat will remain closed, so just put anything you have in the Q&A, and that way it'll keep it nice and tidy for everyone to revisit and keep track of later. And these webinars will be recorded and posted on our website. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Debbie and Karen from W4Site.
Thanks, Emily. I'm Debbie McCann, and I'm going to be presenting today. So let's jump in and get started. Okay, so if you haven't been with us earlier in the week, then we'll introduce ourselves. So I'm Debbie McCann with W4Site. We're an independent software consulting firm in Chicago, and we focus exclusively on working with nonprofit organizations across a wide range of software needs, so including fundraising and some other things that you can see there. And while volunteer management is not on that list, that is also something that comes up a lot in nonprofit organizations. We've been around for about 11 years. We are based in Chicago, but we do work with folks all around the country. That's been one of the silver linings of the pandemic. Our work is pretty easy to do remotely. And especially since we're going to be talking about software today, I do want to make sure that everyone's on the same page. We don't take any referral fees from software companies to recommend or talk about their products. So the research that we did in preparation for this webinar and conversations that we've had with vendors, we are making our recommendations to you based on our experience and what we've learned, but not because anyone is paying us to do so. And just a little bit about the two of us. I'm one of the co-founders of the firm and been doing work with CRM and related software for 15, 20 years at this point. And also was really excited to have the opportunity to work with you all because I have a daughter who rides. She's now 15 and has been riding for 8 years. So, more than half her life, I've been taking her to the barn, and it's been a real privilege to see her grow up around these amazing animals. And my colleague Karen did the earlier two presentations this week, and you can see she kind of has a similar background and also happens to have a daughter who rides. So this has really been a privilege for us to be able to work with all of you. Okay, so as we talk about options for volunteer and donor management, it's possible that some of you are coming to this webinar with the idea like, oh, do I really need a system? What's wrong with my PayPal button on my website? And what's wrong with my Google form that I'm currently using to get volunteers to sign up? And, some things to think about. We can move on to the next slide. Probably this experience with spreadsheets may resonate with a lot of you. Spreadsheets are either the beginning point or the ending point of just about everything that you do related to either fundraising or volunteer management. So just some examples there, you may be receiving donations through PayPal, and you can get a spreadsheet of those donors, anytime you want from the PayPal system. And you may be like for this webinar and the others this week, you may register people for events with Eventbrite, and you can also get a spreadsheet out of there. You may do Google Forms, which populate some sort of a spreadsheet. You can upload from spreadsheets into MailChimp. It's all about the spreadsheets, but what happens after that is you end up with a whole bunch of disconnected spreadsheets. So if we were in a room together and we could all see each other, I'd be asking people to raise their hands if this feels, familiar to you, that you may have donors from multiple years on separate spreadsheets. You have activities that you do on a regular basis, like a barn cleanup, or maybe some other, activity where you bring in volunteers. You've got board lists, you've got event RSVPs, you've got spreadsheets all over the place, but it is really hard to see any kind of big picture about who your volunteers are, who your donors are, who falls into both camps. It's very hard to see that when you just have a bunch of disconnected spreadsheets. So as we think about options for using a system for donor and volunteer management, we wanted to make sure we touched on, the fact that earlier this week we were talking about custodial and non-custodial software to help you manage your mission-focused work. And so why wouldn't you just attempt to do volunteer management and donor management in those systems? So we did take a very close look at that. And the observation that we have is that, really these systems are all about the mission-focused work. There are plenty of ways that you can track the equines, the people associated with the equines, the activities that are associated with them. None of them are really geared toward having schedulable or trackable ways to engage with donors and volunteers. They don't have online forms that you can easily create for people to make donations or register for volunteer activities. There's no easy way to take information about donors and volunteers and use it for communication purposes. It's for what limited functionality they do have is geared toward just tracking the fact that someone is a donor or is a volunteer, assuming you're really keeping track of the detail in some other way. So we didn't feel like any of them were really good contenders to talk about today. So let's talk about some that actually are. So when we talk about donor management, which we're going to do first, I want to point out that if you were part of the webinars earlier in the week, we had some really comprehensive information about pros and cons, and we had links to Airtable research where we have even more detail about different requirements for those systems and how different software options stacked up. And in this case, we did not replicate that same style of research because there are places where it already exists. So one of the most important things I want to bring your attention to is this particular resource, A Consumer's Guide to Low-Cost Fundraising Software. And it's made available by a nonprofit called Tech Impact. And I included the link here to their product. And I encourage all of you, before you make a decision about fundraising software, this is a fantastic resource to learn more about the different features that these tools have, different pros and cons, lots of profiles of different systems. So we're going to talk about two of them today, but if the two that I'm talking about don't hit with you, that resonate and feel like these might be good options, I would encourage you to take advantage of this amazing resource, totally free. Think of it almost like a consumer reports of donor management software. So in thinking about the ones that I did want to highlight for you, the key features that I had in the back of my mind is that it's got to be low cost. We all know that many of your organizations are operating on a pretty limited budget, and it needs some basic fundraising features to be able to both collect money and solicit for donations. And it's got to be easy to simple to set up and use, because if it's so complicated that you need a ton of time and training to use it, that kind of defeats the purpose. So the two that we're going to talk about today for donor management are called Little Green Light and Gila. And I would say they both have similar approaches. And this diagram is a little more complicated than I wanted it to end up. But if you assume that's either Little Green Light or Gila sitting in that purple cloud in the middle, one important thing to know is that they are both cloud-based CRM tools. And what I mean by that is that there is nothing at all for you to install on any computer. From any browser, any internet connected device, you can access these tools. So that is very handy in terms of being able to work from anywhere. Everybody's got a phone with them most of the time. And so you never have to worry that the information that you're looking for is trapped at the office, at the barn, wherever. So they're all on the cloud. They all have connected online forms that allow you to do some personalization and customization for what you need in terms of donations and event registration. And those transactions, when somebody fills out the form, it comes right back into the database. So instead of PayPal, where maybe you're getting an email notification and then you're having to transcribe that information onto your master spreadsheet somewhere, all of this information from the online forms is going to go right into the system. That's a big time savings. If you do still use some third party for taking event registrations because you like how Eventbrite works and probably your event attendees are familiar with Eventbrite at this point, there's also the opportunity for that to sync right back into the software. And even though we're going to be talking about two volunteer data systems that are not already part of the fundraising tools, that data can come right back into the system as well. It's a pretty straightforward process. So you have one place that you can look to be your single source of truth, if that's helpful to you, to see all the activity for both donors and volunteers. And then on the right side of the diagram, the goal is to be able to use all of that information in one place to be able to send lists to MailChimp or a product like that to be able to do mass communications. And potentially, if you're using QuickBooks for finance, you can have your transactions sync over to QuickBooks without having to re-enter them. None of that is required, but the options to be able to do those things may be things you want to grow into in the future, and definitely are potential benefits of using these types of systems. So in terms of the specifics for these two particular products, the things that they both do, so that this doesn't really differentiate them from each other, but just so that you know that these types of features are included, they're of course going to track names and contact information. So by contact information, that includes addresses, email addresses, phone numbers, as many of each as you need to be able to do. And they will allow you to create custom fields. So if you have specific information about your volunteers or donors that you want to be able to ask them, you have a place to put that information. One of the key ways that people use this is to collect information about people's specific interests, so that if you are doing things like sending out newsletters, or you have an opportunity that may be of interest to people who have a very narrow interest that you can tap into, or a skill set, you have a place to keep track of, maybe somebody is very interested in helping with a rummage sale, or doing cleanup at specific events, or you'll know for your organization what those specific lists of things are, but you do have a place to set that up. And they all do give you a place to track event attendance, whether you're using the system to track the event itself or bringing it in after the fact, there is a place to do that. They're all, of course, tracking gifts. And what's really key is that you can easily export data from these systems into any other tools you might need to use. Or even if you just need a spreadsheet for your own further analysis, you can get the data back out. And then we talked about volunteering as well. Often these systems are also limited in the sense that they are geared toward tracking volunteer hours after the fact. So having a place for you to report that Emily spent 6 hours last week or last month providing administrative support to your organization. And maybe Karen spent 10 hours last month providing equine direct care support to your organization. You can track the fact that those things happen, but the donor management tools don't tend to be the place where you can do the detailed scheduling. So that's why we're going to talk about those tools separately. So when would you want to consider Keela? If most of what you are doing happens online, and by doing, I'm talking primarily about donations and communications. So online as opposed to on paper, they really excel at streamlined online everything. If you need to print things to do mailings, or you have a lot of check donations and you need to be able to print an acknowledgement letter and mail it to somebody, that is not something that's as easy to do in Keela. But if you are an online focused organization, Keela can be a great choice. They also have wonderful, simple forms, and we'll take a look at some of their stuff. And you can track gifts by different campaigns or impact areas. So if you want to track what your e-blast that you're going to send out around Thanksgiving brings in, you can easily do that. And if you have different programs that you're raising money for, you can keep track of that as well. They have some great out-of-the-box reporting where you don't have to customize it very much to get some good information. And if, and I think I mentioned this, if you're okay with downloading spreadsheets to do your own mail merges, Keela is a great resource. So in terms of when Little Greenlight might be a better fit for you, if you have a mix of online and print-based activity, Little Greenlight really excels at both. And you can generate mail merged acknowledgement letters or solicitation letters right from the system, download them, print them, stuff them, mail them, all ready to go with personalized information merged in. So if that's important to you, Little Greenlight may be a better fit. Another thing that they really make very straightforward is if you have online purchases that you want people to be able to do in one transaction, but they're different types of revenue. So some examples of that might be an event registration where you also want to invite people to make an additional donation. You might want to keep the revenue from those two things separate, but you certainly don't want people to have to go onto your form twice and make two different credit card transactions. So if you want to be able to combine things like that, or maybe someone's going to register for some sort of training that you're offering and they want to buy a t-shirt, that's just another example of you can do that in a single transaction and still separate the two types of revenue into different buckets. Another way that Little Greenlight really excels is if you know you're going to have ongoing imports of data that comes from other systems, people, gifts. It is a very, very flexible import tool. And if you screw things up, there's an undo button. So it is very forgiving and it is very user-friendly for new users because it has things like an undo button. You can't really break anything. You can't accidentally delete all your data. The undo button, if you map something to the wrong field, it's very easy to go back and just do it again. So that's an important feature. If you want to keep track for maybe some of your larger organizations where you have board members who are trying to fulfill an obligation that you've asked them to either donate a certain amount of money themselves or to help raise a certain amount of money per person. Sometimes that's called a give-get arrangement with the board. There are some easy ways in Little Greenlight to track how much is each board member bringing in so that you can generate those reports and be able to let them know how they're doing toward their obligation. And because it's a little bit more sophisticated system, you also do have greater control over some of the reporting features, being able to really fine tune your email and your appeal solicitation list with a little bit more control than you're able to do in Keela. So to give you a sense of what these look like just at a high level, I know I'm talking really abstractly about these tools because we're not really trying to do full demos today, but we'll talk about how you can get to see that information. But I did want to show you at least a couple of screenshots so that you could really see, like, what do these look like anyway? And what does it feel like to use them? You can see that Keela's look and feel is very clean. It's very simple. This is what the contact list looks like inside of Keela. You can see I added myself into a sample database as a contact, and you get to choose what columns you display there. And it's a very, easy to navigate interface. So this is what it looks like when you actually drill into a contact record. And you can see that there's different tabs across the top. There's the profile tab and the interactions tab. We're not going to go through all of those, but you would certainly see those on a demo. But a couple of things to point out, just again, in terms of how their screens are organized. They're very clean, lots of graphics, and where you see Lois Curtis's initials, you could substitute for a photo. So you can see people in the database if you're not familiar with everybody who might be on your list. And then some of those highlights are like the key pieces of information about a person that you want to be able to see at a glance without clicking around. You get to choose which items you put in that highlights panel. So if, for instance, one of the custom fields you were collecting was favorite ice cream flavor, and you wanted to be able to see that about people right off the bat, you could put that at the top of the highlights. A couple of other things to point out about their profile is that they calculate a donor score. So that's like an engagement score that's based on the activity that you put in the database. So it's a combination of how much fundraising they've done, whether they have volunteered with your organization, the interactions that you've recorded with them. The higher the score, the more engaged they are with you. And you can filter your list of contacts to show you the folks with the highest score. Maybe those are the people you want to be asking for potentially the biggest donation, or recognizing them in some volunteer or supporter recognition opportunity. The system makes it really easy for you to know who those people are. And then you'll see there's a couple of other things that they calculate for you in the smart recommendations area. And just having some of that insight and intelligence surfaced for you, especially if you don't have a ton of experience with fundraising, I think this is a really valuable set of information that Keela brings to the table. So I wanted to try to highlight what I thought was maybe the coolest feature about each of these products. And the one that I think for Keela really sets them apart from some other products is that Smart Ask feature. And you might have noticed that from the profile. The Smart Ask is a personally calculated number for that contact to suggest how much you should be asking for them to donate. And so it's calculated every 24 hours, and there's information here about how that number is calculated for each person. But the cool feature is that if you send an e-blast from Keela that has the Smart Ask field embedded in it, it will send in the email the personally calculated information for each person. So when they read the email, they're going to see that number for them. And when they click on the donate now, the suggested donation amounts that appear there are based on their Smart Ask amounts. So it shows that form with customized information for each person, depending on what the system is calculating as their Smart Ask. I think that's pretty cool. All right, so just to give you a sense of what Little Green Light looks like, it's a little bit different of a look and feel. This is also some sample data in a database. This is from their main contact list when you just see people listed in alphabetical order. And you can see it crams a lot of information in that summary list where you can see somebody's information about their contact, their address, their email address. If they had a phone number, it would be listed there. Another thing to note under Julie Camper's record, the record at the top, it says that she's related to one constituent, And then down at the bottom of her gray bar, you see who it is she's related to. And it turns out that's her spouse. And if you look down at the next record, since they're in alphabetical order and they have the same last name, you see that same information in reverse. Sample Camper is also related to one constituent, and that constituent is Julie Camper, the spouse. So having those records tied together, if you have a lot of family relationships in your organization, you can also use that for employer-employee relationships or other organization relationships. That's a helpful way to be able to keep track of that information if it's helpful to you in your fundraising planning. And then you can see all that other detail that surfaces for you. So inside a little Greenlight profile, similarly, you can see there's a place to upload a picture. It has all the names. It's just a little busier. I think the layout is a little bit more dense in some areas, but you see there's a lot of information that is provided to you. And anything that's blue in the screen is clickable. So for instance, where you see on the right that it shows they've given 3 gifts for a total of $3,000, if you wanted to know more about that information, you could just click on that 3,000, and it would open another screen that would show you the list of those 3 gifts. So you'd be able to see the date and more detailed information about them. So in terms of a cool feature from Little Greenlight, I wanted to give you an example of their form flexibility. So I didn't put in the financial part of the form, but as I mentioned before, you could register for an event and make a donation. There would be boxes for each one on the form. But this other part allows you to collect additional information. So this is clearly custom that was done for this organization to add, you can opt into their email list. I'd like information about this volunteering opportunity. Let me know how my business or organization can support this organization. And based on the checkboxes that the donor checks off when they're making a donation, it triggers activity back in the database. For instance, a task to your volunteer coordinator to follow up with this person who says that they're interested in volunteering. You can also have some flexibility where maybe your executive director does not want to be notified for every $5 and $10 or $25 donation that comes in. She doesn't want to be inundated with an email for all that stuff. But if you get a big dollar transaction, let's say over $100, she does want to get an email. There's the flexibility to have those conditional notifications as well. Okay, so in terms of pricing, because obviously that's high on everybody's list of something to consider, Little Greenlight for the long haul as you grow will be cheaper. But obviously, as we discussed, there's different features and different reasons to choose different products. But their lowest tier plan, you can have up to 2,500 records, and a record is either a person or an organization, and it's $39 a month. That's for unlimited users. It's all the features. You get their knowledge base, their Facebook group, unlimited email support, and they have an excellent, excellent support team. They're extremely responsive. I know when people hear that it's email only, they sometimes are concerned, but these folks are incredibly responsive. It's a really, really good support structure. And it is also less expensive if you choose to pay on an annual basis as opposed to monthly. That's true for pretty much any system. For Keela, they do have what they call a freemium plan, and you can have up to 250 records in the database for free. And then once you start to accumulate more records than that, then you do pay on a monthly basis. But they're similar in that, you know, all the support is included. The free plan does include only limited functionality. You can't do events, and there's some other pieces that you can't do. But if you want a way to get started and see if it's for you, it's a pretty low risk, low cost way to do so. So one thing to make sure that is clear about both of these systems, and this is going to be true for pretty much any other system that you look at as well, credit card transaction fees are over and above the actual system license fee. So this chart, and I won't go through every block, but it has, kind of a detailed comparison of the transaction fees. The thing to know is that they're all about the same. And most of these products, there is a feature where the donors can opt in to cover the extra processing fee. You've probably seen that on places where you may have made a donation. And, all of these systems will tell you that the research shows that the vast majority of donors do opt in. Hard to know how seriously to take that. I don't know personally. You might know from your own experience anecdotally how true you feel that is, but that is what all of the product folks will tell you. So how do you get started? Both of these products offer an extensive knowledge library with videos and articles and startup guides and ways to help you get started. They are very invested in your success, and they don't want people to fall off the wagon just because they're experiencing hiccups getting going. However, if you've never worked with a system like this before, and this is new, you should be prepared to spend a chunk of time. I estimated 10 to 20 hours. Obviously, that will vary by organization and how many people might be working on this with you, what your experience is, but it is not a sign up, fill out a form with your organization's name, and you're done. But I think there is great guidance available from both of these products to help you get going. They both provide a free trial. Gila has that premium whole version, but even the full featured system, there is a 14-day free trial. Little Greenlight has a 30-day trial, and you can get support through both of them. Little Greenlight outsources the support to outside consultants. Gila does it themselves, but either way, you do have access to support resources that if you feel like you need some additional support in order to get rolling. So I included this slide just because it has links to, I think, pretty much everything we've talked about, including the Tech Impact Report, Little Greenlight specifically, and Gila. Just to point out, Gila's website is gila.co, not .com. That's not a typo. But the email addresses for their employees do have a .com. So I'm sure they get a lot of questions about that. Both of them allow us as consultants to offer a discount code to you all. And so if you are interested in going forward with a trial of either of these, you don't need to enter in a credit card for the trial. But once you get going, if you decide to subscribe for both of these products, putting in our code will get you $75 off for the first year. So what about volunteer management? Because I think a lot of organizations need that too. So in terms of the features that we had a sense that everybody was looking for, just the opportunity to register and get signed up, be able to see volunteer opportunities, sign up for specific shifts, not just I'm interested in volunteering, but I am actually signing up to show up on Saturday at 10 o'clock. That's key. And to be able to communicate with your volunteers. If you have a whole team of people that are signed up for Saturday at 10 o'clock and it's raining and you're going to have to reschedule whatever it was you were going to have them do, you need a way to be able to communicate with them quickly and easily. So we have two recommendations, and I don't know if you're maybe familiar with Sign Up Genius, but Sign Up Genius certainly fulfills some of these things, and Time Counts fulfills some of these things. So I want to talk a little bit about what each of those brings to the table. So similar to the donor management, there are some features that they both have. So you can track the names and contact information of your volunteers, shifts and signups. You can have a way for people to cancel, which is helpful if undoubtedly people will have to cancel sometimes, communication opportunities, and a way to track that people actually showed up. Both of those things are important, or all of those things are important. We'll talk about time counts first. This is a little bit more sophisticated system or full featured in that they have a whole volunteer hub for your organization. So think of it as almost like a separate web page that you can link to from your regular website that gives you basically Volunteer Central for your org. And you can have a volunteer registration process where people actually fill out a form and you can ask them to share specific skills and credentials that you want to keep track of. You can also decide to offer certain volunteer opportunities for the general public or reserve some for only your approved, what they call members, people who have submitted volunteer applications who have been accepted by you. And if it's necessary, you can also choose to approve requests to sign up for specific opportunities before you finalize who's participating in specific volunteering activities. So just to give you a sense of what it looks like, it's really nice and clean. This took me only a few minutes to set up in a test account where you can put in all the contact information for your organization, and you can put in a logo, you can change all the colors. You can really personalize this and indicate which of these big buttons you want to activate so that people can sign up and look at events and see what opportunities are there for them to sign up for. There we go. So this is a time counts volunteer sign up form. So once you actually click into a volunteer opportunity, this shows you, the print's a little small, but this shows you there are 4 different volunteer time slots, and they're for different actual activities. I don't know if you can see it, but the top one is for cleaning stalls, and the second one is for cleaning the tack room. They're both from 6 to 7:30 on the same day. And then there's a second set from 7:30 to 9, also on the same day, second shift for cleaning tack room and cleaning stalls. And it's also really small print right here, but it tells you the number of slots that are available for each of those opportunities so that you know when you sign up whether it's already full or not.
Just lost audio for that last 5 seconds or so for a moment.
Oh, I'm sorry. So just that this form does include the number of slots that are available with each opportunity. So you can see how many slots are left when you sign up for something. And we can go on to the next slide. So this is what their volunteer summary page looks like when you're logged in. And obviously I am just testing this out, so I didn't have any commitments, but it would tell me the total number of activities that I'm associated with, how many hours have been credited to my account. You can see that if I had scrolled down, there were anything that was pending. And it's like a whole Volunteer Central thing that you can use for your organization. It's all very nice and neat. So for Sign Up Genius, it's basically a much simpler version than what Time Counts has to offer, but depending on your needs, it may offer exactly what you need. There is no overall hub website for you to have Volunteer Central for your org, and there's no specific volunteer registration form, but maybe that's not necessary for you. You can't really track details about skills or credentials, and there's not really this notion that you're trying to track somebody's volunteer hours over time. But that said, we go on to the next slide. It is really straightforward. So you can see you can have a picture there for barn cleanup. That was actually one of their stock images. You can have the date and the time and the location. And I did exactly what I did in Time Counts. I created 2 different time slots and 2 different types of activities. And you can have a set number of people for both. And you can sign up for one or more of them very easily. And it will ask you to create an account where you have to register your first and last name and your email address, but it's all very straightforward. And really, if that's all you need to keep track of folks, it works great. So what you just saw with Sign Up Genius is based on their free plan, and it may very well serve all of your needs, and you don't need to move into a paid plan at all. You do have to be willing to see the ads, but you can see, those are all the tools that you get even with the free plan. So the reminders and everything are all fine, unlimited sign-up pages. Everything is very straightforward, or you can upgrade to their premium plans to get more features. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see even the premium plans, especially the lowest level premium plan, is not very expensive. And this is showing you the annual cost if you prorated it on a monthly basis. Of course, it's cheaper if you do pay annually, but you do have the choice to pay monthly. Looks like it's only an extra $1 a month to pay monthly. So that gets you some additional features, but still at a very affordable price. So time counts, sorry about that. They have similarly all the base features in their free plan. You can have an unlimited community database, everything that you saw, in my little test setup in terms of having the volunteer hub with information about your organization and the events that you can set up with different roles, having auto reminders, being able to track volunteer hours. Everything in time counts is available for free. And so if you're also looking for a free plan that has quite a bit of functionality, this is a great place to start. And you can see even in their paid plans, their lowest level paid plan, also not very expensive. And the payments that you're making in their plans tend to just give you more of what's available in the free plan. So for instance, you only get 2 administrative logins in the free plan. If you have 3 people who are doing volunteer coordination, then maybe you need to either share an ID, which isn't always ideal, or upgrade to essential. You can send more emails, etc. But all of these are pretty affordable, and the free features really are very comprehensive. So with volunteer management, how do you get started? Our recommendation is select the free plan for the tool that you would like to pilot and pick a specific opportunity to use as a pilot process. I don't think it's necessary that you have to commit to using either of these tools, or any tool really, forever without trying it first. And pick something, see how it goes, let your volunteers know that you are trying something new, and ask them for feedback. It's definitely, I think, a very important part of the process where making sure that you're sure that this is going to work for you. Your volunteers are obviously a critical part of that equation. So take the opportunity to ask them what their experience was like and whether there's anything that you might want to change. And just some additional resources here also, links to their websites. And if neither of these felt like they were striking the right chord with you and you want to take a look at some others, this link to Capterra is a website that also has at least a dozen volunteer management platforms that you might want to take a look at. Some are paid, some are free. But if you're looking for something that's just a little bit different, that might be another source of information that would be helpful to you. And then any questions, feel free to ask. And I think that's it. That covers everything, everything you need to know about donor management and volunteer management.
Thank you so much, Debbie. So I'm just going to put it out there to our attendees. If you have questions, we're at kind of our open Q&A section right now. So if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box, and we'll either answer them live or type the response to you. And then Ashley and I just kind of subtly write our own questions while you're giving your presentation. So one of my questions for you, Debbie, is, and Karen, feel free to pipe in on this too, because as this is our 3rd webinar, we've done 3 kind of very separate issues. And there are a lot of organizations out there who will probably say, okay, but now I need all 3. So what is your advice for an organization that is about to kind of dive off into the deep end of needing to figure out something for each of the things we talked about this week?
I have an opinion.
I think opinions are okay, because
Yeah,
I think the thought, if you know, if you're starting from total paper records and you kind of look at
right.
this and you go, oh my God, I
I'm
need to keep
overwhelmed.
track of these horses. I need to keep track of
Right.
these owner requests for help. And now I have volunteers. And now it's like opening our bedroom door and seeing all the clothes on the floor and just deciding
Right.
to shut the door and walk away, you know?
Definitely familiar with that reaction.
Yeah.
My suggestion for anyone who feels like they need more than one of these and they're a little overwhelmed at the thought of going from where they are today to, where they would like to be in the future, is realize that you don't have to solve every problem up front to feel like you've made progress. And progress is definitely the key here. My suggestion is to think about, between custodial services, non-custodial activity, donor management, volunteer management, which of those things is hardest for you now? Which of these things, if you could just make it a little bit better, would make a significant difference in the life of your organization? And start there. You don't have to start with all of them simultaneously. Pick the one that you think is going to have the biggest impact. And another way to think about it is, who are the resources, people-wise, in your organization? Do you have multiple people who could be engaged in this effort so that the same person isn't responsible for everything? And if you do have the luxury of being able to tap different individuals to take on different pieces of this, that might give you some additional bandwidth, obviously, to do more in parallel rather than waiting for one piece to be resolved before you move on to the next thing. But don't be
So
afraid of
maybe,
small progress.
so maybe if you're going to need volunteers to help you do the data input, maybe you want to get started on the volunteer portion first.
I will tell you, of all the 4 different kinds of systems that we've talked about this week, the one that in my estimation would take the least setup and could potentially have the greatest bang for your non-buck, because they're free, is the volunteer management. Because both of those solutions that we talked about today, plus any number of other ones in that recommended resource list, you could be up and running in either of those within a matter of an hour or so.
Cool. So on top of that, in terms of just focusing more narrowly on our presentation today on donor and volunteer management, we just said volunteer management, that might be the easiest one to get up and running. In terms of donor management, there's so many, it seems like there's a lot of different aspects of that to kind of get started. And you talked about it a little bit, but just for the people out there like me who do really well with a checklist of, okay, start here, pick the one you want, then start. Is there an aspect of donor management either inputting kind of, the incoming dollars or the incoming people or dollars you need to be reaching out for? Is there kind of one of those aspects?
I think for most, I'm guessing a little bit since we haven't
Mhm.
had the opportunity to talk directly with a lot of your members about this topic, but to guess based on our experience with a wide range of nonprofits, getting the money in the door and getting your donors thanked is usually job one. Everybody needs to raise money. And so if you have to pick one thing in donor management to focus on first, get an online donation form that connects to your system up and running. It does not have to be fancy. Both Keela and Little Green Light give you the tools to do that pretty quickly. And then you can feel confident that someone can go to your website, click a button, make a donation, receive a thank you immediately without any human intervention that has all the appropriate tax language. You're off the hook in terms of getting that done as long as you set up that confirmation email. And you can at least know that you are keeping track of your online donors. That is potentially a huge step forward from what many people may have now.
And in terms, I think we're all quite tired of this word unprecedented, but in terms of COVID, when pivoting, our in-person events have really required this kind of instant pivot fundraiser wise, that the online fundraising aspects are probably really critical in terms of choosing donor management programs.
Right. And all of them make it really pretty easy for you. And, these two in particular. And certainly, I think this advice holds for all of these systems. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. You don't have to have everything figured out beautiful, fine-tuned in order to get rolling. Your donors understand that we're going through unprecedented challenges right now. You can capitalize on people's goodwill, I think, for a while longer if things might be a little rough around the edges. Just get your stuff out there so that people who want to support you can support you.
And then last question, and I'm sure Ashley has a couple. So in terms of, we just said COVID and getting money in, are there any, and forgive me if you talked about this and I just missed it, but in terms of tax reporting, do any of the donor management systems offer tax reporting, like in terms of you said it exports maybe to QuickBooks? Is any of that kind of tax reporting aspects? I'm sure we might get some questions about that.
Well, there's usually two aspects of tax-related compliance. One is letting the donors know that they have made a donation which may be tax deductible. You know, it's really the donor's responsibility to make the determination about whether under their personal circumstances, is it deductible. But you give the verification that you are a 501c3 and that they should consult with their tax advisor, and you can confirm the date and the dollar amount of the gift. And if that's not language that you have already written out and confirmed by someone, either your bookkeeper, if you have someone who provides that service for you, might be able to give you some language. Honestly, if you Google tax, 501c3 donation language, you will see a million examples. But all of that can be set up in these donor management systems as the automatic confirmation email. It can just be at the bottom. And so that part of it is done. I think the other part that you might be referring to in terms of tax reporting is that nonprofit organizations have to file what's called a Form 990.
Yes.
And so the ability to translate your incoming fundraising dollars into what goes on the 990, you really need to talk to the person who puts together your 990. But usually you need to capture what contributions are made by individuals, what comes in from corporations, what comes in from foundations, and what comes in via special events. So as long as you are capturing those buckets when you have donations flowing into your database, you're usually pretty close.
Cool. Ashley, did you have any questions?
I do. So my first one was, because we went through this recently for UHC, do either of these options, or any of these options really, have import capabilities? So like if all of my volunteer information is on an Excel sheet, are either of the options able to easily import that information if I was like a beginner at import?
Yeah, I think so. I would have to double check that for Sign Up Genius, but yes, I believe that that is true. And
then my other question, just two-parter, and I asked this yesterday, but as far as the feel of the software, which of the options do you feel would be better suited for like an entry-level person or a beginner? Or is it sort of just equal across the board and you really just have to do that onboarding?
Are you talking about the volunteer management or the donor management, Ashley?
Either or, either or.
That's a hard question to answer because there's really two parts to what you're asking. One is if you've never used a system to do this function before, like let's say you're a super tech savvy person, but you've never worked in a donor management system, your experience is going to be different than someone who is not tech savvy and has never worked in donor management, right? So I think from a tech savviness perspective, I think all the things that we were looking at are about the same. You have to be tech willing, even if you're not tech savvy. None of them are impermeable or expect anyone to be a programmer or anything like that. But they do expect that you are willing to read a few introductory articles, watch a demo, and play around. And rest assured, you can't break it. But if the whole concept of donor management is new to you, nonprofit fundraising is new to you, there are some great articles in both systems in their knowledge bases that provide you some fundraising 101 also. So make sure that you look out for those.
Thank you.
So unless anybody has any other comments or questions, that might wrap up the week for us. I feel like this has been a very accomplished week. We've talked about so much.
Well, we wish everybody all the best in your software journey. Don't be afraid to take that first step. I think that's, you know, the last thing we
Definitely.
would leave you with. Try things. It is okay if you don't like them, because all this stuff you can try for free.
Yeah. And again, for our attendees, we still have some attendees on the line. All of this is recorded. The whole week was recorded. We've set up a web page on the main United Horse Coalition website under the EWDC drop-down list to basically summarize all of this, put it all in one place. All of the recordings are there. We have the air tables there. We're probably going to link to the 2 kind of analysis websites for donor management and volunteer management that Debbie talked about today. So if the options Debbie talked about today don't fit your needs well, those links will be right there for you. And then as always, you can reach out directly to Ashley or I. And I'm sure if you'd like to reach out to Debbie and Karen for their consulting skills, you're welcome to. But feel free to direct your questions to us, and we'll happily either point out your needs on the website or try to help you figure out what you need to help figure out.
Sounds great. We wish you all the best.
Well, have
Thank you
a
very
great
much.
weekend. Have a great holiday season.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks,
Take care,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye-bye.